Welcome to the Global Guideline on Candida diseases. I'm Oliver Cornely, and together with Rosanne and Sprute, I had the pleasure and honor to lead this endeavor. And we are both located at the Institute of Translational Research and Clinical Trial Center at the University of Cologne here in Germany, and at the European Mycology Excellence Center. And the guidelines were done under the auspices of the ECMM, where the entire program originally comes from, and then by ISHM as well, and by the American Society for Microbiology. So these are all the authors and the full title of the guideline. So it's the Global Guideline for the Diagnosis and Management of Candidiasis, and that is basically more or less all forms of candidiasis. And as said, it's an initiative of the ECMM in cooperation with ISHM and with ASM. So all the authors represent 134 institutions, and there are the 9 ECMM excellence centers among these, which is counting. So I guess we have more than 9 now, but the authors represent the 9 back then. And all 6 continents, 45 countries, and it's a book more than a journal publication, but we do have an executive summary, and that is what you would find in the Lancet Infectious Diseases from this year, 2025. And we are not going through all the numbers here, but I want to familiarize with the methods that we applied. And if you are familiar with the Global Guideline program, then you already know what will come now on the next slides. So what did we do? How did we set up the Candida guideline? First, we need to select the experts who would work on the large variety of different diseases. So we need people who are involved in diagnosing or treating Candida infections. And they should have published or must have published on Candida and Candida diseases in English language. When the publications need to be listed so that it can be found either in PubMed or Web of Science. And we tried and did our best to balance for gender and for specialty and geographic location across the world. And we use for that, for practical purposes, the regions as they are defined by the United Nations. So we had 6 coordinators, and that is Drs. Revati, Santolaya, Ostrowski, Ziegner, Zhu, and Bassetti and Chen. And you already may have spotted they are from the 6 continents involved, and they were instrumental to secure logical and formal structure and to coordinate the allocation of topics, to identify missing topics, and to supervise the progress. And there's one more reason why they should come from the different continents. It's just very practically you don't have that many time zones then to cover if you need to reach out by phone to one of the colleagues in your region or continent. So what we do once we sit down and draft the tables, actually, that always come with these 7 columns you can see here, and we do, and that is decisive, 2 independent evaluations. One is on the strength of recommendation, and the other one is on the quality of evidence. So SOR independent of QOE. We felt, when we designed the methods as such for the entire program, so many years ago, we felt that we need to split these 2. Otherwise, we have never-ending discussions, because many of the areas we cover, there are not several large randomized controlled trials that give a definitive answer. So often we are lacking evidence, and we can't just, wherever we lack evidence or lack fantastic evidence, wonderful, convincing evidence, where we lack that, the strength of recommendation would then be very weak if we don't independently evaluate these 2 as separate variables, so to say. So this procedure allows us to give a strong recommendation for something despite a lower quality of evidence only present. There are two examples in this table. One is more or less funny example with the if you're on an airplane and there is a parachute, so would you use it? And in terms of the tables, which give a logical structure from left to right, that would be phrased like this. For the population's people on planes, the intention is to survive when jumping off a plane. The intervention use parachutes. And the strength of recommendation for this would be an A, but it has never been formally tested, etc., etc. So it's only opinion. Maybe one would find something that is called a series or a cohort, so to say, but certainly not a randomized trial. So that's a typical example for an A3. That's completely artificial, of course, and we don't even find a reference for this. But what about going for patients with fever? And that's a population. We all have seen patients with fever. The intention is to diagnose phengemia in these patients. Well, what you do is take a blood culture. Never ever that has been randomized. So at least we didn't find anything that has been randomized. And that means that the quality of evidence will never be a 1. So it will always be a 2. And I will come in a moment to explaining what that little u means there. So it's an A, strong recommendation to take a blood culture in that situation with that intention and purpose, but the quality of evidence is weaker than what we would expect. And we have that in many instances in a field that lacks clinical trials, randomized clinical trials, lacks often funding in the field of fungal infections. Strength of recommendation, we have it comes in 4 different flavors, so to say, and it's A, B, C, and D. A, B, and C are the positive recommendations, strongly supporting a recommendation, moderate strength for the support of a recommendation, or the guideline groups only gives a marginal support for a recommendation. That's the 3. And it's more or less traffic light system. And then number 4, the red light, is a recommendation against using a specific test or against using a specific treatment. And let's have a look at the quality of evidence. There are 3 levels here, not more than that. We do have level 1. As mentioned already, that's what you ideally deal with because that comes from a randomized controlled trial. At least one of these you would need to find or to document a level 1 quality of evidence. At the far end is level 3, which is the weakest. It's opinions of respected authorities based on clinical experience, descriptive case studies, maybe even individual cases, and reports of expert committees. For example, there might be other similar quality of evidence, but I guess we all got the message. Level 3 is not what we want. We want level 2 or ideally level 1. Having explained what level 1 is and what level 3 is, basically level 2 is everything in between these 2 extremes. And because it's such a mixed box, what we need is an additional small, 1 letter or so that gives us some information where in that box does the evidence really come from. And that we have as the source of level 2 evidence. And there are 5 different letters that would stand for the R for a review. That could be a systematic review, or ideally it would be a systematic review, or even a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So that is R. Then T is transferred evidence. We may have a clinical trial in adults, but 17-year-olds were not enrolled. So how do you decide on adolescents? You would use would use guidance from the clinical trial that was done in an adult population, but that would be a transferred evidence. That is why we give it a T. So wherever is a 2T, we know we actually still need a randomized clinical trial in the appropriate population. You may have a randomized trial in hematology, but not in solid organ transplant. So you derive from the one study and transfer evidence to the other population. So that's where it's a T. Then we have H for comparator group, but if it's a historical control, and then there might be uncontrolled, just a series of patients, for example, or uncontrolled trial, U. And then an A if there is only an abstract. So you really want to cite that study because you are convinced that is the best study out there to support a specific combination of population, intention, intervention, but it has only been published as an abstract. So we sometimes use these, but ideally the publication will follow quickly, so the full publication of that abstracted study, and only then we would want to use it. But occasionally, one or two cases in the past, over the last 10 years, we had to use A for abstract because the only evidence wasn't an abstract, there was no randomized trial, and it took a while to publish the study. So sometimes, but really infrequently, you would see that A for abstract. The search strings used, I'm not going to read this, but that is what you would find in the print version or online version of the guidance documents. And that extensive search string would be a part of the full length version of the guideline, which is a web-only supplement to the executive summary published in the Lancet ID. The authors were located over these countries, all the countries in dark green. So we would want to improve on specifically representation of colleagues from Africa. And we are working on this constantly. I think with the upcoming Aspergillus guideline, we are a bit better than with the Candida guideline. And so, but all parts of the world were involved. We want to represent our authors, not only regions, but specific settings of healthcare, authors and coordinators. And the healthcare settings, because our global guideline, that's why we call it global guideline, should provide evidence that can be used and recommendations that can be used in each and every healthcare setting. There are 73 endorsing societies on top of the 3 that organized and led the effort, and they are in these green countries. And with that, methods already over. It's very simple, actually. It's a lot of work. And it's a big thank you to you, but it's a big thank you to the other 103 authors. You can count whether I miscounted or whether it really is 104 of us in total. So thank you very much for lending your ear and for your interest. And I hope you like all the different aspects that are being discussed by authors from all around the world in this YouTube channel or playlist. Thank you very much.